Welcome back, Queen, to another episode of According to Annie. I am so excited to once again be dropping on in with you today and sharing this magic, this wisdom, lessons. Feels good. Feels really good. How are you? How are you? I hope you're doing well. Today's topic that I want to delve into is a little bit about my journey. There's a lot of new followers that have come into my world recently, and some of you will have heard it. Some of you might need reminding, and some of you just might want to sit back and enjoy and re-listen to the entrepreneurial journey that I've been on. And so I really want to take you right back to the start, because I know that so many women look at the life that I'm living and the version that I am right now and think that that just magically happened overnight. And it did not, FYI, it did not. It is far from what happened. It has been one hell of a journey where I have multiple times wanted to walk away and multiple times wanting to throw the whole business idea in, because it is just downright hard sometimes. And so I want to take you back, and I want to explain to you today a little bit more detail in how I went from pretty much not even broke, but like massively in debt, to having a $95,000 profit increase in just a 12-month period. And so I want to share with you about that journey, because that phase in my life was one of the biggest pivotal moments in my career, in my business career, that has allowed me to live this life that I live right now. And I know so many women desire more. I know you desire more. I know you desire, financial freedom. And I'm going to be really real with you today. And I'm going to share the parts that haven't been shared, because I think it's important for us women to understand where we're coming from and to understand that we're not alone on this journey. And so I really am going to delve into the behind the scenes of what was actually happening and going on for me, and why I don't want that for you, regardless of what your situation looks like. And so when I started my salon, I started it in 2014. That was when I went commercial. Prior to that, I had a home salon. And it's really interesting when I reflect back and I go back over this journey, because there was patterns. There was patterns that reoccurred from my first lot of being in business, from having a home salon, to also when I had my commercial salon. And today I want to share with you a little bit around the relationship side of things that I had with the partners at that time. Because I think that was a really big factor in why I wanted more money, because I didn't feel like I had choices at that stage. So I want to really delve into it. So let's delve into it, and let me share with you my journey, so that you can kind of understand that I have been where you are, and that regardless of your situation of where you're at right now, it can always change and it can always be different. So just know that you have the power to change at any given point. I really want to empower you to know that you do have that power. You might not feel like it, but I promise you, babe, you have that power in you to be able to change your current situation to a different reality. Okay. So let's back it right up. So I don't even know what the year was, but I was 23, bought my first house with my partner at the time. We'd been together for a few years. And this house that we had purchased had a bungalow out the back, and I was able to set up a little home salon. And so that's what I did. I set up this home salon, and it was so, so good. It was I thought that I'd reached the pinnacle, having a home salon, being able to go from the salon to quickly throwing dinner on, or go from the salon and hanging out the washing. It was so good to have that flexibility. And I loved it. It was great. But the truth is that at that time, the salon wasn't really making enough money for me to be able to contribute to our household. And so I also was in network marketing, I was doing Chef's Toolbox. I don't know if you've heard of that. They've now gone into liquidation, and I was out of the company before they went into liquidation, but I was also doing Chef's Toolbox, which is like party plan kind of stuff, I suppose. A bit like Tupperware. Everyone knows Tupperware. But it was pots and pans. And so I was also doing network marketing as well. And I was doing nighttime parties. And so I would go to people's houses, and I was making pretty good money with that. So on average, I would probably make anywhere between $200 to $300 per party for a couple of hours worth of work. So I was doing that as well. And then when we bought our house, obviously like our financial situation had changed. And so I knew that I probably needed to get another job as well. So I was working in a call center. Not many people know like the entire background story of all of this, unless you have been in my world for a while. But I was working in a call center for the government. So the Department of Education I was working for. And I was doing like 3 days a week in that. I was working in my salon, like 3 days plus nights. And then the nights that I wasn't working, I was doing Chef's Toolbox parties. So my life was pretty busy. And I mean, the money it was okay, but it was nothing to really rave about. When I look back now and I think about the amount of hours that I was putting in, I was working pretty fucking hard for very little money, if I be honest. So, but that's what you do, isn't it? Like, that's what you do. And that's what we're taught from society, that, you know, if you want more money, you just have to work more hours, and you just have to work harder. And then throughout that time, my relationship started to break down, and it was starting to fail, and it wasn't really working very well. And all of a sudden, like, I was put in a financial position where I didn't really have the financial security for myself to be able to set myself up. And if we were looking at selling our house and going down that path, well, like, then I was back to square one again, and I wouldn't have a salon. So like, now what? And that's what ended up happening. So we ended up having to sell our house. We had it was a pretty messy relationship breakup. There was a lot of nastiness. There was a lot of betrayal. And I was not in a good space. And if you've listened to my other episodes, you will have heard the spaces that I ended up getting into. It was a pretty dark time for me. I had experienced my first heartbreak, like real heartbreak, and it was horrible. This was the guy that I thought that I was going to marry and have kids. And in hindsight now, like, holy fuck, I'm so glad that didn't happen. And I'm so glad that the universe had different direction for me. But at that time, it was really hard. It was one of my hardest times, and I felt very much alone and like no one was around. But I didn't have the financial security, and that really scared me, because now all of a sudden I'm out on my own. We're having to sell our house. I had to go and rent a space in a local salon. And so I was smart, because it was a daily rate. And I was like, if I do 2 12-hour days and squeeze all of my clients in, then I only have to pay for 2-day rates instead of having to pay for an entire week. So that's what I did. So I shuffled all of my clients into 2 full days, and I worked 2 full days in the salon. And then I worked 3 days in the call center, and then I was doing nighttime parties in between all of that as well, because like that's what I needed to do to financially survive, as well as try and heal my heart and all of that messy stuff that comes with a breakup as well. And because it was quite a nasty breakup, there was a lot of other things that went down throughout that period. And that was when I decided, you know what, like, I'm going to pack up and I'm going to move out of this town. And so I did. I packed up and I moved from Bendigo down to Gippsland in Victoria, so about a 3-hour drive. And I set up a commercial salon, but that didn't happen straight away. So what I ended up doing is I found this salon, or this building. It wasn't a salon, and I had to do a complete shop fit out. So the money that I had got from selling of the house, I was going to put into the shop fit out and do that. That was my plan. In the meantime, I fell apart massively because I wasn't really working. I didn't really know anybody in the area either. So I was very isolated. And yeah, like I said, if you've listened to my other episodes, you will hear that it was definitely like my darkest times that I have ever experienced in my entire life. And from that moment, because I wasn't working, I was doing a little bit of chef's toolbox to get some money in, but mainly I was living off the money that came in from the settlement of our house. And again, like I just felt like I was in this position of like, fuck, like I just don't have any money. And I just mentally, I didn't have the capacity to be able to pull myself up and out of this situation that I had encountered or put myself into. And it was just really, really hard. But thankfully, I got the help that I needed and I was able to get the salon going. I really wanted the salon to only take, like 8 weeks maximum. And I moved in the January of that year. And then I didn't open the salon until the July of 2014. So it was essentially 6 months of not really working much at all. I was doing a couple of clients from home, but not much because obviously I didn't have a proper setup. And yeah, it was just really hard. So I was doing some chef's toolbox parties as well at that stage. And then once the salon was up and running, then I was like good to go. So I got the salon like up and running, worked all these crazy hours, and it obviously takes time to build your clientele base when you're new to an area, you're a new salon. Where I had picked the salon was slightly out of town as well. So like people would come to me and they'd be like, oh, I didn't even know you were here. How long had you been here? And I'd been there for like 2 years at that stage. So it was kind of a little bit out of the way as well, which probably didn't help me growing the business. And yeah, I ended up having to get a loan as well from the bank. So I had to go through like a business proposal plan. And oh my gosh, if you've ever had to fill out one of them, they are a nightmare. They ask you so many questions and they want so much detail around absolutely everything. They really make sure that you are serious about wanting to get a business loan. Because your business proposal is so lengthy, your business plan, they want to see that you really do know what you're talking about and what you're doing, so that if they are going to give you this money, that you are essentially going to be able to pay it back and you're not going to be a liability to them. And so I filled out all of that documents and I got the business loan, and it got me by for a little bit, like helped me out with some shop fit out stuff, because I ended up having a few things blow out more than I had anticipated. And so I was really starting to get very low on the settlement money by this stage and still didn't even have a salon open. So I had to get a business loan, and then I obviously applied for some credit cards as well, just as like a backup plan, and just like tried to like wing my way through it. And so that was where I was at. And then the salon finally opened in the July. And I started working, and it was a slow start. It was a slow start, but we got there. And, I was doing the best that I could at that time. And then in the November of that year was when I met my most recent partner that I'm no longer with. And so I met him in the November of that year, and like the business was still really struggling. And I didn't tell him that, obviously, because, I was a strong, independent woman, and I don't want my new partner to think that I'm not being very successful. Like that's not cool. I definitely had a lot of shame and embarrassment around all of that. And he actually asked me to move in really quickly. So by the February of that next year, I had actually moved in, which was kind of great in one sense, because financially it took a little bit of pressure off me, because as you know, when you have a business, it's pretty much essentially you having a second house, because you have all of the same bills that you have for your own home. And so not only is your income having to cover the entire expenses of what the business has, but now it's also having to cover your home expenses as well. So you're essentially, you have like double the amount with one stream of income. So when he offered me to move in, I was like very excited by that opportunity. And it was young, fresh love. And, like this was like the guy that I was like going to spend the rest of my life with, like the other one. And so I was very excited. And he worked away. So he worked offshore. He did 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And so for 2 weeks of the month, he wasn't even home. He was away working. and I would have the house to myself. So it kind of worked really well. I was still doing Chef's Toolbox parties by this stage as well, because there still wasn't quite enough money coming in. And the interesting thing is, like, when people would say to me, like, why do you do it? I would say, oh, I love it. Like, and I did love it. Don't get me wrong. I did love what I was doing, but I was mainly doing it because of the money, because I needed the money. But I didn't want to tell people that, because then that would mean that the salon wasn't being as successful as I had been making it out to be. So I just would tell people that, oh, I just love it. It's so good. And I did, but there was also the money factor too. So that's what I was doing at that stage. And then after a couple of years, my partner and I hit a really, really rocky patch, really rocky. And I was in a really bad financial position. I had been really honest with him about where I was at. Stupidly enough, I had actually also just borrowed more money to get a new car, because I wanted a new car. And so there was part of me that's like always known that I've had the capability of being able to make a lot of money, but just timing just never really worked out. And I just kept praying and hoping that everything would be okay and it would all work out and the universe would provide for me. Even though I didn't like technically know that terminology or that wording back then, there was definitely a part of me that still felt like I had what it took. And so because I took this loan out, then it was more financial pressure on myself, and the salon just was not making enough. And I would dread the postie rocking up, delivering more mail. And I would joke with him and I'd be like, it's okay, you can keep that bill today. And he would laugh. And I'm like, he really has no idea that I'm actually serious. Like, I don't want to open that Telstra bill. I don't want to open that electricity bill. Oh, if there's a brown envelope, I knew that it was an electricity bill. And I was like, where the fuck am I going to get this money from? So I ended up also getting an overdraft account as well at this stage. And so the overdraft account that I got was, I was approved for 20,000 and I got it. And that kept me afloat again for just a little bit longer. And I didn't even tell my partner at the time that I had this overdraft account, because I held so much shame about how unsuccessful I was being in business and how I just didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I was just winging it every day and pretending like everything was going fine when really it really wasn't going fine. But I just didn't have the courage to admit it to not only him, but to myself. Because if I said it out loud, well, then that's like a whole nother level when you actually admit it from there. And so I remember really, really clear at this point in time where our relationship was really, really struggling, and we were fighting a lot about money. We had, he had also had a career change, I think, by this stage. So he had decided that he didn't want to work offshore anymore and wanted to do an adult apprenticeship. And so that meant, he went from astronomical amounts of income down to like I'm talking like hundreds of thousands, down to like $50,000 for the year. And so that put a lot of strain on our relationship, and we were fighting a lot about money. And because, he was earning his money and I was earning my money, we never combined our money, and it was very much hers and his. And, if he was spending money, then I was getting jealous and angry that I didn't have the money that he could spend, and then vice versa. And it was a really toxic conversations around money that we were having. And now when I look back, I can see lots of things that did unfold. I can actually see a lot of my own wounds and a lot of my own triggers that were being activated throughout that time. I just didn't know it at that time. It's only now that I've done that reflection and I've done that inner work that I can actually spot that. But in that moment, there's no way that I had the awareness like I have right now to be able to pinpoint what was going on. And so I remember really, really vividly at one of these stages, we were really not in a good place, and he was really struggling. And so he was turned to drugs and alcohol, and like I would call it late at night and he wouldn't be home, or he wouldn't come home, or he wouldn't answer my phone calls. And there was lots of things that were going on for both of us around that stage. And neither of us had the awareness, neither of us had the communication skills to be able to like actually talk about it and try and like hear each other out and work through it. We kind of just both shut down, really. Anyway, our financial situation got that bad that we decided that we needed to sell his house. So he had a house with his ex-wife, and it was like the family home. They had built it, but with him no longer working offshore and with the salon not really going as well as I had hoped, and I had been really honest with him by this stage that the salon was really struggling and I didn't have the extra funds to be able to help him out, we decided that we would sell the house. But the thing is that we didn't tell people that we were selling the house because of how hard of a financial situation we were in. We told people that we were selling the house because it was just too hard to maintain. And on the weekends, because now he wasn't working offshore, on the weekends, we didn't want to be doing all of the garden and the maintenance because it was on 5-acre property. And we wanted to be able to just enjoy our weekends. That's what we told people. That was why we sold our house. When really we sold our house because financially we fucking needed to free up some money. And I've never told anybody that. So this is like super vulnerable, me sharing this with you. And if my ex is listening to this episode, I do hope that he's okay with me sharing this as well. But you know, this was a huge part of my journey, and I really want you to realize that it hasn't been roses all the way through, and that we don't have to hold shame around our situation, that we can actually get the help. And I hope that me sharing this story with you gives you that relief. It gives you that weight off your shoulders to know that if you are going through this situation, you aren't alone. And I want to bring more awareness to this because I know that I am not the only one that went through this situation. I'm sure there's so many other people that have gone through this situation, but we all hold so much shame around it. And I that's why I'm sharing this with you, because I want to shift the shame out of it. We're all doing the very best that we can at that time. And if we could do better, we would do better, but we don't know better. And so that's why I'm sharing like the intricate details of what actually happened and part of the journey, so that you do understand that I have been where maybe you are, or where you've been, or maybe you're scared about going down this path. I've been here. And so, yeah, with that, you know, we told everyone that we were selling up the house because we didn't want to be doing all of these like house maintenance stuff on the weekends. You know, our time was so limited now that he didn't have 2 weeks off every month. And that's what we did. So we sold the house. We priced it to sell. We probably, you know, if we had a little bit more time and weren't so desperate for the money to come in, we probably could have easily got more for it. But we were just in a situation where we were just like, we just need it gone. And so we put it on the market. We actually sold it ourselves. So when I sold my previous house with my previous ex, we also sold it privately. So we followed the exact same thing, which means that you don't have to worry about handing out fees or, you know, any of that stuff. You literally collect all of the money. So yeah, I would highly recommend that if you are ever going to sell your house, to sell it privately. If you want some information around that, just DM me and I'm more than happy to share that information with you. But I sold both of our houses privately, and I also sold my business privately as well. So I didn't go through any brokers or any real estates. So I would highly recommend that you do that, because then there's more profit in your back pocket, which is what we're all about. So, sorry, got off track there. So we sold the house and we downscaled massively. And so we were able to pay a huge amount off the loan. And obviously he was able to financially give me a little bit of support to pay off some of my debts as well. And it's still like, whilst that was great, like it still wasn't enough for me to be able to get out of the debt that I had put myself in. And obviously I didn't tell him about my overdraft account. So I had to keep trying to figure out a way to try and get that to be paid out. And that just keeps going in the reds, week after week, week after week, week after week. And I just I kept burying my head in the sand about it, and I just didn't know what to do with it. So it ended up making my situation even worse. And so with this really rocky patch that we were going through, we were also doing some couples counseling as well at that time. I was in therapy too, because I was really struggling with our relationship. I was really struggling with being a stepmom. I felt like there was just so much responsibility on my shoulders, and I just felt like I was drowning. I honestly felt like I was drowning with trying to be a good mum, trying to be a good wife, not that I was married, but trying to be a good partner, trying to run a business. I also had some team as well that I had employed at this stage, and I had no fucking idea what I was doing with my team, and it just was a nightmare. It was horrible. And I remember one point, we had gone out for dinner, and we had the kids with us, and my partner, we were at the local pub, which was like 200, 300 meters from our home. And he had said to me, you take the kids home and I'm going to stay. And I remember walking home that night thinking, what am I doing? Like, really, what am I doing? Seriously, like, I know that I took the responsibility on with these kids, but like, I'm also struggling too. And yet here I am walking home with the kids while you're staying at the pub. And so that was probably like one of the moments where I was like, I don't know about this. And then there was another moment in our relationship as well where I knew that I just didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And I felt like I deserved so much better. And I felt like it wasn't working, and I felt like I wasn't being heard, and he was on his own path and didn't really want to be saved. Not that we can ever really save anyone, but he was just not open at that stage to doing the work on himself or to take responsibility for his actions. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I was perfect either. Like, I know that there was a lot of my triggers and my wounds that I brought to our relationship as well, which obviously then mirrored to him, and we became this toxic kind of couple. And I remember one particular night, he didn't come home, and I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to be here when you get home. And so I wrote a note, and I literally had like $150 in my bank account at that time. And I rang one of the local hotels at 11 p.m. at night, and I was like, do you have a room for me? And he was like, yeah, we can do a room for like $110, I think it was. And I was like, okay, I'll be there in the next 15 minutes. And so looking back, like, I think I did that from a point of view of like, it was a big cry for help with him. And I was hoping that he was going to get the wake up call that I needed him to have. I needed him to see that I was serious, that I wasn't going to put up with this. I feel like for probably the best part of like, probably 2 years, if I'd be really honest with myself, I kept saying to him, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to put up with this. But the truth is I kept enabling the behavior because I kept putting up with it, and I'd never stuck to my words. So me going and staying the night at this motel after he wouldn't answer my calls, or, where I could find out where he was. And I know that was bringing up all my own abandonment issues and wounds as well. I'm aware of that. I've worked through so much of that stuff. But, it was a really interesting time because I literally had no money in my bank account, none. And after that night, he rang me the next day because obviously he came home and seen that I wasn't home. And I'd said to him, like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, it's too hard. And, he was like, okay, all right, like, we'll make it work. And I had no money to be able to go and stay anywhere else. And I remember calling into a friend's house, and she was like, why don't you just like get your own unit or, something like that. And I was like, I can't. I literally have no money. The salon is not making enough money. I literally spent my last $100 on the last night's accommodation, and I have nothing. I'm fucking stuck. And that was how I felt. I felt like I was trapped. I wanted to leave this relationship, and I wanted to give myself more, but I couldn't. I was so stuck. And I know that many women are in a similar situation where financially they cannot afford to to be able to get themselves out of the situation. And so if I look back now, if I was in a financial position, I probably would have left a long time before I actually left. But because I felt stuck, I felt like I had to stay. I honestly felt like I had no other choice. Where else was I going to go? I didn't have family around me in the area. I didn't have any friends that, that I could feel safe enough to be able to ask for that kind of help. I literally felt like I was trapped. And so that is not a very nice place to be in, when you know that you deserve more, when you know that you don't want to be in this relationship or living this type of life that you're living, and yet you can't do anything about it. You feel like your hands are tied behind your back. It is a really horrible place to be in. And, he was able to swing me around, tell me what I needed to hear. And because I was financially just so stuck, I was like, okay, well, I don't have any other options. So, okay, let's continue to try and make this work. And so we did. We continued to try and make it work for probably another, I don't know, maybe 3 years. And it still was very rocky on and off throughout that 3 years. But nobody knew that. To the outside world, we looked like the perfect fucking couple. To the outside world, we looked like we had it all made. But really, behind closed doors, it was fucking hard. It was really hard. And I share that with you because if there is someone that you're admiring in their relationship, or, you're wishing that you had what they have, just know that what they show you it's not all the be and end all. They show you the bits that they want you to see. It's rare that someone's going to be really honest with you about what does go on behind closed doors. People didn't know that we were in couples counseling. It took me a very long time to convince him to come to couples counseling, because as a masculine man, that was very, and he's a tradie. So that was we don't do that shit. We don't talk about our feelings. And he actually said to me, if we need to go to couples counseling, then we're doomed. We might as well just end it now. That was what he said to me. And I was like, well, I don't believe that. I believe that if we go to couples counseling, it means that we're actually trying to work on what we're working on, and we can get an outsider's point of view. And so, yeah, after lots of teeth pulling and showing him I was really serious about if he wasn't interested in doing couples counseling, then I couldn't see us continuing any further, because we couldn't see eye to eye with each other. We couldn't agree to disagree, and we needed that third person to actually help us see it from a different perspective, from from my point of view, but also from his as well. And yeah, so eventually we did go into some couples counseling, and it was an eye-opener. But I think by this stage, I had probably really started to already check out, because I'd been hurt so many times, and I felt like I'd given him so many chances prior to that point in time. And so at this stage, when the salon was still really struggling and my relationship was majorly falling apart, I knew that I had one chance to turn it around. And so I decided to relocate the salon into the main street. There was an empty shop in the main street, and we literally had to gut the previous salon, and we moved all of the cupboards. We moved absolutely everything, the basins, everything over to the new salon, so that we could do it at a minimal cost of a shop fit out, because we didn't have the money to be doing an extensive shop fit out. And so it was very basic to start with everything. And then as soon as it was at a working stage, I just was working 70 hours, because I never wanted to be in that situation where financially I did not have choices. I didn't want to be in that situation where I was I need to be able to be financially independent. I need to have my own money. Not to leave a relationship, but just to feel secure in myself, to know that I can look after myself, because there was definitely a part of me that felt like I couldn't look after myself. I had to have a man in my life to provide and look after me. And that even in itself was very new to me, because after I had left my household as a teenager from 18, I very much was fending for myself. And so there was a part of me that felt like I had gone backwards a little bit by needing to have this man that I had to rely on financially to provide for me. So that was a really big driving force for me, was to get back into a financial position where I felt like I was secure enough to look after myself. And so the December was absolutely flat out, because that's what happens in our year, in our industry at that time of year. And I had a killer, and I made all of this money. And so then I went and booked all of these holidays for the following year, and we lashed out and bought all the kids these amazing Christmas presents and did all of this stuff. And then January rolled around and my January died in its ass again. But I had spent all of the money that I'd made in December. I think I'd done like a 30,000 turnover in December on my own. And I was like, fuck, I'm back to square one again. And it was then that I actually had a phone call with a specific industry business mentor who literally showed me that I was amazing at doing hair and doing my job, but I clearly had not learned any business skills. And she was right. And I'm pretty sure I can confidently say that 99.9% of hair and beauty salon owners have done no business skills, no business training, which is why we slog ourselves to try and make more money, because it's the only way that we know how to do it, is to work with more clients. That's the only skill set that you've actually learned. And so I get on this phone call with this chick, and Troy, my partner, was on the phone as well. And that was really confronting, because they were asking me a lot of vulnerable back-end questions about the business. And he really had no idea how bad it really was, or how bad I was at business. And so for me to have to answer these questions put me in a really vulnerable situation, because he now really knew how fucking bad the situation was. And I hadn't been as honest with him about that. And so to get started on this 12-month container, I needed to put down a $2,000 deposit. And like literally, I didn't know I have $2,000 to put down to get started, but I knew that something had to change. And I had no idea how I could make this work. And so Troy offered to give me $1,000 off his card if I could put down 1,000 myself. And I literally had like $1,100 in my business bank account. That's all I had to my name. And I had rent as well that was due to come out that week. And I said to her, like, I need some time to think about it. And she was like, look, why don't you just put me on mute? You and Troy have a conversation about it, and then come back and like, let's get you started. This woman was not letting me get off the phone unless I was putting down a deposit. So I muted. Troy and I had a conversation. He was like, how do you feel about it? And I was like, yeah, I think I can do this. Like, I already feel like I've learned so much from this call. And I was like, I need to do this. Like, I don't have any other choice. And he was like, all right, well, if you think that you can do it, then all right, well, I'll give you 1,000 and you can pay me back once, you start making this extra money that she talks about. I was like, all right, cool. So I unmute. And I say to her, okay, I literally have like $1,100 in my bank account. Troy's going to give me 1,000 on his card. And I said, but I also have rent that's due this week. And she was like, okay, great. So what we're going to do is we'll do the 2 payment transfers. So we'll do 1,000 off your card. We'll do 1,000 off Troy's card. And then she said, you're going to immediately get access to everything. And what I want you to do is I want you to implement everything straight away, because within the next 7 days, you're going to be able to make this money back to pay for your rent. So do you think that you can make this work? And I was like, yep, I can do this. And she's like, okay, cool. So she's like, when is your rent due? And I was like, it's due at the end of the week. And she's like, okay, well, it's up to you to get in, because I'm confident that as long as you follow this process that I'm going to give you, that you will make this money. And so I was like, okay, like, let's do this. And so I love a good fucking challenge, and I am a high achiever. And that comes from a very wounded place because of unconditional love that I didn't have growing up as a child. And so I have had a big driving force of like, if you set me a challenge, I'm going to prove it to you because I need the validation. Now, not so much because I've worked through a lot of that, but a lot of my success was based on being validated and being feeling like I was worthy of my success. So I was determined to just achieve whatever I had set out in front of me. And so after the first week, I made an extra $3,500 just from implementing just a couple of simple strategies that she had told me about. And then after the first 12 months, so after this very first 12 months of working with this mentor, I had increased my profit by $95,000. So obviously over that 12-month period, like I was learning so much stuff. I was learning about how to lead a team. I was learning about how to hire a team. I was learning about marketing. I was learning about like how to manage my money as well. So that if I had a great week, like where does the money go? What should I be doing with the money? How much of it is actually my money versus the tax versus the BAS versus the expenses? Like I had no idea what that was. And so what was happening, like I was earning, say, if we go back to that December, 30,000. And then all of a sudden I've spent 30,000 when 30,000 was not mine to spend. And that's why I end up putting myself into a pickle. And so this is why it's so important that we like understand all of these business concepts that we must learn as business owners, because that's actually what grows the business. It's not you working with more clients. It's not you working more hours. And so in this 12-month period, I reduced my hours. I went from 70-hour weeks down to a 38-hour week. At that stage, I didn't want to get off the floor. I still loved what I did. I just didn't want to have to work as hard as what I was working. And I had, my goal was to just work full-time hours. That would be amazing. And so that was what I got to. So full-time hours. After 6 months, then I rehired staff. And honestly, that was the best thing I ever could have done, because in that first 6 months, what that enabled me to do was to get really, really clear on all of the solid foundations that I needed to have in place to know my money, to know my finances, to know how much I actually have left over to pay a wage if I was to put someone on, to understand how much that person needs to make me in order to actually employ them and make it worth my while. And so I learned all of these KPIs. I learned everything about how to hire for the right person, how to actually have like proper team meetings, how to support your team. I learned all of these things that really set me up after that first 6 months of working with this mentor to then go and hire a team, which then meant by the end of that 12 months, I was able to, in the following 12-month period, because I re-signed with her, I was able to reduce my hours again even more and really start focusing on the business side of things. So I had business days, CEO days, I had training days with the girls. And like I started to shift my focus from working with clients to actually like growing and scaling the business. And so that has been like the first part of my entrepreneurial journey. Like I said, it's been a fucking whirlwind, and there's been a lot of like highs and lows throughout this journey. And investing in a mentor was the most scariest thing that I've ever done. It was, at that time, it was $23,000 for 12 months. And like a good week for me was like $1,500, and a bad week was $500. And to be honest, I felt like I was having more bad weeks than I was having good weeks. And so to then be committed to a $549 a week payment, I was like, what if I don't make this money? But she promised me that as long as I did the work, that there was no way I couldn't not make the money. And I knew that I was a hard worker, and I knew that I was already living my worst case scenario, and that it could only get worse from here. So what did I really have to lose? You know, I implement, I give it a go. And if it's not going to work out, well, I've learned a lesson, but it was the best thing that I ever did, because from that moment, I've never stopped investing in myself. And so if you want to live a life that is full of freedom, that is, you know, like whatever it is that you want, maybe you want to start a family, like whatever it is, I encourage you to just trust trust that if there's a mentor that you feel safe with, if there's a mentor that has similar values to what you want in your life, that is the answer. And whether that's with me or with somebody else, it doesn't matter who it's with, but that person has a blueprint that's going to save you so much time, that's going to save you so much money. Most coaches and most mentors have got an extraordinary journey of hardship and success. And so literally they are giving you a blueprint to save you time, to save you money, to save you stress, to have you step into your dream life a way quicker than they ever did, because they've done it all before you. And so now you get to save yourself time and money by investing and getting that support that you actually need. So my advice to you is that if you want more, start looking for a mentor that is living the life that you crave, because they're showing you what's possible. They're showing you that they're doing it. And so reach out and have a conversation with them, and don't let the money stop you, because mentorship is an investment. It is not an expense. And if that person can't show you how you can make that money back, then know that you're going to make that money back in other ways, like in your mindset. You can't put a price tag on shifting your belief systems, on letting go of all of the beliefs and the rewiring your brain. You can't put a price tag on that stuff. That's what changes your world. The money is just an added bonus. It's a byproduct of who you are being. And so if you are prepared to rewrite those stories and go down that path of setting new beliefs and unpacking your triggers and your wounds and knowing all of that stuff and being prepared to have the courage to go down that path, then there's no doubt in my mind that you can be successful, because it's the inner work and the strategy that creates that. And yes, like I didn't know that at the time when I first invested in this mentor, but my next lot of investment with her was straight into the energetic side of things and delving into the spirituality, because that's where the next level of financial freedom comes from. And that's where the next level of embodied freedom comes from as well. So I really hope that you have enjoyed hearing my journey. And like, I love to be so vulnerable, and I love to share the highs and the lows with you. And like I said today, like I have not shared a lot of that vulnerable story that went on with my ex. And I'm sure there'll be another episode around the actual relationship breakdown and all of that in more detail to come, but I'm not feeling the call for that just yet. But I just want you to know that you have the power, babe, to change your life. It's up to you. Stop waiting for someone to come and save you. No one is coming to save you. You have to save yourself. Yeah. And that is why I created Ignite, because I want women to always be financially free, to be able to do whatever they want, whether that is to leave a toxic relationship, or whether that is to just book that girls trip for the weekend and not have to feel like they have to ask their partner for the money. Like whatever it is, I think every single woman should be financially independent so that they can have the life that they actually deserve. And if you're working and you're running a business, baby, you fucking deserve to be paid for it. You deserve to be paid for it. I hope that so much has landed for you today in this beautiful, vulnerable conversation. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for holding the space for me to share this beautiful part of my life with you. And I hope that it inspires you to keep going, because I promise you that on the other side of the discomfort is where the magic fucking lies. Have a beautiful day. I'll talk to you soon.